I'm the Director of Liberal Arts here, and Yasmin is an English and creative writing student that's joined us. So hello,
Hi
Yasmin.
there.
And so basically, as we go through, I'll talk to you a little bit and do a kind of taster session around liberal arts, tell you a bit more about it. And then if you've got any questions about student life, about what it's like to study, you can ask Yasmin, and she'll certainly tell you about her experiences and what it's been like. If you get any sort of program-specific questions, anything like that, just let me know, and I'll be delighted to help out. So, without much further ado, I thought I would start by talking about what we mean when we talk about liberal arts. Because some of you will sign up and think, what exactly are we talking about with liberal arts? What are the liberal arts? Now, I put up a picture there. You can see. I almost go say a photo. It's not a photo. It's an illumination from a medieval manuscript, and it's a book that's produced by a monk. A monk, excuse me, that's not right. It's a nun, a 12th century Alsatian nun called Herod of Landsberg. And if you look, what you see in this thing looks like a wheel, and each one of those is a discipline. You can see up the top, they've got grammatica, then they've got rhetoric and dialectics, and as it goes down, they've got all manner of different disciplines. And in the middle, you'll see you've got Lady Philosophy sitting on her throne, and actually Socrates and Plato sitting, looks like they're having a wee cup of tea or writing manuscripts, one of the two. But the idea is that's a sort of description of what the liberal arts are. Herod of Landsberg, that manuscript was called the Hortus Deliciarum, which means in Latin the Garden of Delights, the Garden of Earthly Delights. Now, she was a nun. This was all religious in focus, and what she said was that actually between all of these little disciplines, a scholar would move like a divine bee. And like a divine bee around this garden of earthly delights, moving from one flower to another, it would sort of enrich the whole garden and bring it to bloom. So the idea was that, a scholar moving between different disciplines would in some way enrich things. And that's really what we think about when we think about the liberal arts. It's really an opportunity to study across different disciplines. Now, lots of people talk about what that might mean. There's a wonderful quote I put up from a guy called Jacques Barzin, who's a French historian. And he talks about the fact that it kind of shifts you out of this obsession of immediate place and from an obsession of immediate time. Gives you a different perspective, different angles, different ways to look at it. Julie Thompson-Klein, who is a scholar of interdisciplinary studies, talks about it as boundary work, the type of stuff that we think about in the modern world. Now, take a look, if you will, at that illumination we talked about, that wheel. Now, I'm going to show you something else that looks a little bit like that. And that is here at Queen Mary itself. Now, this is a place called the Octagon Library. If you visit campus, it's a beautiful place on campus. It's one of the oldest bits of the institution. It's really nice. People use it for like events and all sorts of things. People get married there even. But one of the things you'll notice is if you look at this thing on the left, you'll see all these kind of busts. And this is of modern thinkers. And you'll find a lot of modern thinkers and writers in those little bronze busts. They've got Shakespeare, they've got Milton, they've got Walter Scott. I'm going to name one of the Scottish figures there, of course. But you see that around that kind of outside bit. But if you walk right into the middle and look up, that's where you see this, light well on the right. And actually, if you notice, they've got a whole host of bronze plaques there. And those are thinkers and writers from the ancient world. We're talking Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, like we just saw on the Herod of Landsberg's illumination. But actually, I think it's quite striking how much that light well looks like Herod of Landsberg's illumination. It shows us that Hortus Deliciarum. And actually, if you go right back to the start of Queen Mary, the first time we named charitable objectives as a university at Queen Mary was back in, I think it was 1902. And one of the reasons that they talked about in terms of their mission, it was to give a liberal education to the people of the East End. And that's right back at the start. You can see it's there in the mission of the university, the liberal arts, the idea of what it takes to be a free citizen, to be a thinking person. It's right there in the mission of the university. And I would argue it's actually built into the fabric of the university as well. It's there in the building. So it's an important thing in terms of what it represents. Now, What does it actually mean? Well, we've got our first cohort of liberal arts students who will be graduating this summer. I'll be up there super proud as I watch them walk across the stage. I'll be there cheering them on. And one of the things we've been aiming for to support with liberal arts students is, if I was standing here talking to you about history, for example, I'm a historian by training. I might say that I was really, really, really wanting to be critical thinking above all else. But actually, liberal arts is a bit different because it's not just critical thinking we want. We actually also want you to be critical, compassionate creatives. That's people that know how to pose questions about the world around them, but also know how to talk to people from different cultures, how to respond to things compassionately and think in different ways. And that's really important from day one in terms of what we do in liberal arts. At Queen Mary, we have from day one integrated language study. That means that all of our liberal arts students study a language in their first year. You don't have to carry it on, but you might find you love it. But we want people to have that intercultural communication, the idea that they can go further and kind of walk the walk when it comes to global connection, or I guess talk the talk in that sense as well. So it's French, Russian, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese. These are great options in terms of what you can study. And I would say, don't worry, if you've never studied languages before, you can start them as absolute beginners. That's, have various options throughout that you can talk about and look at. It might be you've done a French A level. That's fine. You can study it from post A level. If you've never studied French before, great. You can study it from an absolute beginner. Same with German, same with Spanish. So there's lots of different options for you to try out. I should say, one of the things you'll find is that liberal arts, especially, is all about finding that space to explore, to find the disciplines that actually make you passionate and make you want to do them. We talked, one of my excellent liberal arts students, she said that, she was on another degree at another London university in Bloomsbury. And one of the things she felt is actually it was kind of putting her on rails in first year. She's going to have to do one specific thing and do it the whole way. And it wasn't that she couldn't make up her mind about what she wanted to do. She just had really strong sense of what she wanted to do. And actually, it didn't just mean one thing. It was the opportunity, the options, the room to explore, that space to explore across different disciplines. Actually, a big part of that is whether you want a 3 or a 4 year degree. We have the option of a year abroad or a year in industry. We had some wonderful students doing year in industry last year. One working for a big fashion company, another working for a really big kind of essentially food infrastructure company that just entered the FTSE 100. Really, really important in terms of like how we talk about food supply in the UK. So both like really interesting ways to apply interdisciplinary skills and find out those things. So really, there's a huge range of different experiences on offer. So I was going to give you an example. In your first year of study, you take some modules which focus on London's global connections. So we'll have students that come in, they'll study the language that I mentioned. I'll illustrate that for you. They'll study something called culture and language. It's a big module that explores different ways of understanding the world, different disciplines. We'll talk about film, visual culture. We'll talk about, ideas of literature and poetry. We'll talk about some linguistics. We'll do lots of different material like that. You'll also then study a module called history and as fiction, studying the past in fiction and fiction in the past and what it means to think about, authenticity and reliability and these different types of ideas. And you also study something called London culture performance. That looks at ideas of performance and reading different sources that are not just texts as well, but you can actually go further than that and understand performance and how it fits in with this global idea. From your second year, really, and I should say then, you move into the second semester of first year and you get a lot more choice. We'll get into that in one little second. And especially from the second year, the choices are like astronomical. There's so many things to choose from. We organize things into different themes. These help guide you. So it's not just a big, load of different module codes, but sort of like a kind of curated list that helps you pick from those different bags. We've got expressions, which looks at different types of language and culture. You might think about how language works, about how people interact in that way. We've got connections, global and digital. That looks at networks in all sorts of senses in the world, in all senses of the word, excuse me, how they span all over the world, how we might understand migration and diaspora, but also how we might understand the digital world and the connections that we see there as well. And the last one is interactions, societies and cities. And that's the most social sciencey of the three themes as well. But you can pick a whole range of modules from across those interesting themes. They're just there to guide you and give some coherence in terms of how that actually looks. And I mentioned down there, you'll be choosing modules from all over the place. Languages, you might like modules in film or linguistics. You might be interested more in history or geography. It might be English, literature, or drama. It might well be politics or international relations. Or it might even be some of our excellent, we've got a couple of really good options in the second year from economics as well that will let you kind of accentuate that humanities work you're doing with some really quantitative work around, for example, an introduction to banking, or the other one we mentioned is the economics of social issues, of social policy, excuse me. Looking at that as well. So what does that mean? Well, just to give you a sense of how that fits together, this is what the first year would look like. So you can see you've got your language study. So you can choose French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Russian, as you like, at the level you like. You'll then do, and sorry, I should say the first column takes you from September all the way up until the new year. And then the second column is the second semester, and that is from the new year all the way up to kind of spring, Easter type time as well. Just a normal academic calendar in that way. So you can see up top, you got French and you got your language choice. You then do culture and language. Then in the first semester, you do London culture performance and history and as fiction. And then you'd start to choose, as I mentioned here, from about 13 different options. So that's 2 modules from 13 options, and it's a free choice what you like. So I dropped 2 in, so you can see what kind of options they look like. That's one from the School of History called Foundations of Modern Thought. That's big political thought ideas. You might think about, what does freedom mean? Liberty? What do ideas of the state kind of come together when we talk about that? The next one, Understanding Global Cultures, is another one which really looks at a kind of philosophy type approach to things as well. A lot of really good ways to explore that. And of course, you'll be supported throughout that, just to give you a sense of how that's put together. And then we'll get on to doing this kind of wider content taster as well. But you'll be supported throughout. You'll have an advisor. We'll have people attached to the degree, like myself as the director of liberal arts. But it's really important, I think, that we actually equip people to be those flexible, competent, self-starting students that are ready to be engaged global citizens. You can see some of the cool things we've had students doing recently. There's visits to the Barbican. We went on a cool trip there. We've had events with Latin American protest music, where we had live musical performances, as well as then kind of intellectual discussions about the type of music we were talking about. On the right there, you can see one of the things we did, which was a big tour of the East End, taking people around and showing them different ideas of what was available. So lots of really cool ideas of what was possible. And, embedding yourself here. It's also important now, don't worry, I've just put this up. There's a big kind of slide with lots of stuff going on. You're not meant to kind of read it all through or anything like that. It was just to give you a sense of the types of study and work that's been done on the type of graduate attributes that this produces. Humanities graduates, like liberal arts students, develop really important skills. As I said, critical thinking, but also different types of approaches and language skills. I put a statistic there on small and medium enterprises and those that kind of embrace language capabilities are 30% more successful in exporting than those which do not. These are the types of skills that matter. This is how it builds you and builds your resilience for the world ahead. So what does liberal arts offer? Well, as I said there, space to explore, lots of choice, lots of options. It offers you support to grow. We make sure we're there with you at every step of the way to support you in terms of your choices, but also your studies. And you get the skills to succeed at the end. This is about not just saying it's something which is nice to have, but fundamental skills that will prepare you for the world of work. So that's all I was going to do in terms of talking a little bit about how the course is put together, just so you understand what we're talking about when we talk about liberal arts. Now, you might think, we've got this kind of idea now of what a kind of broad degree it is, all kind of different interdisciplinary ideas. What I would say to you is that then makes it tough when we think about a taster. Because what do we offer? What do we say? What do we do? Well, that's what I thought I'd try and do something which would take you in a couple of different directions. And I would talk about something that you might actually recognize. Now, hopefully, everybody recognizes what that is. Let's try it in the chat. Can anyone tell me what that is in the chat? So can you tell me the name of the statue on the screen? There's one for you. I wanted to start with something I hope that everyone would recognize. If you just fire in the chat, what are we talking about here? You can have a quick think. The Statue of Liberty. Yes, absolutely. That is what we tend to call it, the Statue of Liberty. Thank you, Terrell. Thank you, Maya. Absolutely. So we call this the Statue of Liberty. Now, interestingly, that's not its official name. Its official name is, as we'll see in just a second, Liberty enlightening the world. Lady Liberty enlightening the world with her torch. But we tend to call it the Statue of Liberty. Now, actually, I was going to talk to you about that because I thought, well, that's a useful start. We know that, we can recognize that, but also we can go into it in some different ways. Now, my kind of inspiration for thinking up this small taster class started just last year when we took my daughter to Disneyland Paris. Strange place. It's a nice place. It's fun. It's good for the kids and all the rest of it. But it's a strange place because you've got this American outpost almost right there in the heart of France. And actually, when you go in, if you go right in the main entrance, you'll see there's this on the left here, this cut through. Now, if it's really wet or it's really hot, you might want to use this. It's a quick way through, so you don't have to go down the big, busy main street. And it's called the Liberty Arcade. Now, let me tell you, I actually have done a little bit of history about how Disneyland Paris got set up in France. And of course, it was not an easy thing. The French started calling it, they called it a cultural Chernobyl. It was a bomb at the heart of French culture, this American influence. And actually, as a result, the Disney company, they set up these little things to try and kind of like, you know, just smooth things over a little bit. Now, interestingly, you go in this Liberty Arcade, and they've got this little window, this little display right here. And if you go right in, you see all types of things in this display. And this immediately caught my eye, right? As I say, my training is as a historian. And so I'm walking in Disneyland Paris, and I start to look at this, and I'm like, hang on a minute. I recognize the people in these photos. These are really important historical figures. What on earth are they doing here in Disneyland? And that's when I started to try and figure it out. The first figure there, I knew, recognized quite well. That's Mary Wollstonecraft. Now, you would not expect to find a portrait of Mary Wollstonecraft in Disneyland Paris. That is fundamentally a strange thing. Now, Mary Wollstonecraft's an interesting person. She's a kind of local girl in a sense in terms of Queen Mary. She was born in Spitalfields. But she also defended, she's a really important political thinker. She wrote this book, you can see on the left, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. Now, she wrote that after, in the French Revolution, they wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Now, that was a really big step, that Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. But actually, quite importantly, Mary Wollstonecraft said, oh, man and citizen? What about the other half? You know, there's a kind of important thing we're forgetting. And her idea, really putting things apart, was talking about gender, in a sense, as tied to liberty. She talked about that. She also talked about enslavement and the idea of how chattel slavery operated. And she said, look, if you are kind of subjugating women, if you are like buying and selling people as property, there's no way you can talk about liberty. There's no way you can talk about that as being vibrant and alive in the world. These are fundamentally, if another person is treated as property, be that a woman or enslaved person or, you know, an enslaved person of any gender, like, really, there's no liberty worth talking about. Now, that was really revolutionary at the time, revolutionary within the context of revolution. And that's quite an important element of that, I think. So interesting to see his picture of Mary Wollstonecraft. Now, why is he there? Well, liberty was what she was talking about. Now, actually, if we look at someone else in this image, in this little thing here, you can see this guy with a beard. Now, his name is Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. Now, Bartholdi is important because he's the guy that sculpted the design of the Statue of Liberty. Now, interestingly, where did he get it? Well, first of all, he was touring Egypt and Yemen throughout the 1850s, and he went to Abu Simbel. You can see I put a picture of Abu Simbel here with the huge mega statues, the tombs created by the ancient Egyptians. Now, he was there, he was, you know, inspired by it, and he was saying, hang on a second, why don't we make statues like this anymore? Why don't we create monuments like this anymore? And he had a real strong idea that he wanted to propose a statue that looked a bit like this. Now, during the Second World War, oh my God, the Franco-Prussian War, excuse me, there we go, woo, Franco-Prussian War in 1870. The reason I connected that, sorry, is that the Franco-Prussian War ends when the Prussians invade through the Sedan Gap, which is exactly the same thing as happens in 1940. My mind was on the Sedan Gap. But in the 1870 Franco-Prussian War, Bartholdi works as a liaison with some Italian forces, and in particular with Giuseppe Garibaldi, who's one of the people that's involved in the unification of Italy, a kind of staunch defender of freedom all over the world. Now, Bartholdi, with this image in his head of wanting to do something like the monuments in Egypt, he creates this statue here, Egypt carrying the light to Asia. Now, you might well say, hang on a second. I recognize that statue, and you're right, because it looks an awful lot like the Statue of Liberty. And the reason for that is he proposes this when the Suez Canal is created. Suez Canal opens in 1860, 1861. It transforms trade, it transforms economies, it brings Europe and Asia closer together. It even transforms the economy of places like Australia, for example. But the idea is they want to commemorate it with a big statue at the mouth of the Suez Canal. And this is what Bartholdi proposes. And it's meant to be an Egyptian peasant woman, Fellah, carrying the light of progress, the torch of progress. And it's opening up the Suez Canal, connecting together continents. Unfortunately, they turn him down. They say, no, thank you. You can take your take your proposal and just walk on down the street. Instead, they've got a kind of like blocky lighthouse type thing. It's meant to look a little bit like the lighthouse of Alexandria. It's okay. I think this would have been better. But the good thing is, this means he has a design to reuse. Now, this is when he gets the opportunity, because actually, who creates the need for the Statue of Liberty is this guy here down the bottom that you can see, Edouard Laboulaye. Now, Laboulaye is an interesting guy. He is a scholar. He's a lawyer. He's a scholar of jurisprudence. He studies and he writes about law. And he's at the Collège de France, which is the kind of big fancy bit right in the middle of France. And he's alive during a period in France. He's, working during a period of France where actually France is kind of moving back and forth between republic and empire. If I tell you now that in 1789 they created the first republic, okay, the first republic of France, but by 1870 that's when you had founded the third republic, and in between are empires. First republic, first empire. Second republic, second empire. Third Republic. That's a lot of changes between 1789 and 1870. That's nearly kind of 5 changes of government over that period. And one of the things that Laboulaye feels is actually to defend a republic, to make it so that you can't just have somebody declare themselves emperor or something. You need a constitution. And he is absolutely laser focused on the fact that America, the United States of America, have got it right. He, as a Frenchman, looks there and says, like, you know what? They became a republic about the same time as we did, but they have defended that republic with a constitution, a codified constitution, and that's what we need. So Laboulaye is really concerned at trying to kind of raise the profile of America and France, about trying to forge relations with the Americans and bring this all together. But he doesn't just do this. So he raises the funds to fund the Statue of Liberty, but he doesn't just do this kind of thing by just putting up mega statues. One of the things he tries to do, and this is where it shows you some of the weird stuff. I'm talking already about history. I'm talking already about politics and the economy of the world coming together. This shows you about why it helps to work across different disciplines. One of the big ways that Laboulaye tries to get his point across is with, and this is a strange one, fairy tales. Edouard Laboulaye writes a series of political fairy tales, and he puts them out in magazines, and they're meant to be like short, kind of entertaining things. You can imagine like a well-to-do Parisian bourgeois kind of intellectual reading their morning newspaper or their magazine, their journal, over their breakfast, and reading these little kind of parables, these little essays that give a certain sense. Now, what Laboulaye was trying to do was all kinds of different things, and you can see it's been translated here by Jack Zipes, who is like the big dog when it comes to translating fairy tales in terms of contemporary scholarship. And there's some interesting ones. He chose one of the most unusual ones for the title, Smack Bam, or the Art of Governing Men. It's an interesting one because it's the fairy tale is all about this like very privileged, very sort of like up, snooty young prince who's convinced he's going to rule the world when he inherits his crown. And essentially his father, the king, decides he needs to become a bit more street smart and world wise. And he does this by appointing an ordinary peasant woman to be his governess, to be his kind of schoolmistress. And essentially, she has a revolutionary tactic for how she's going to deal with his pretension, and that is smack bam. And that the whole fairy tale is basically about how this woman knocks some sense into this young prince. Now, the other one that I was going to talk to you about is one I think is quite interesting because this gives you a good sense of it. Now, what I want you to do is I'll ask this question. I want you to put some things in the chat as well. I'll read you through some of these bits of this fairy tale. And don't worry, I won't go through the whole thing. I've just picked out a short one. Now, this is from a fairy tale that's called Truth and Falsehood. And I think it helps when we think about ideas of liberty, when we think about ideas of freedom, and also what the kind of political ideas that someone like Laboulaye was talking about when he was talking about the Republic and when he was talking about freedom. So, like I said, truth and falsehood. So I'll just read this out to you, okay? And I've kind of shortened it, so I've given you a little kind of bit in the meantime. So he says, in olden times, falsehood and truth resolved to live together like a pair of friends. Truth was a good person, simple, timid, and confident. Falsehood was a smooth talker, elegant, daring. One commanded, and the other always obeyed. Everything went well in such a friendly partnership. It's worth stating at this point that falsehood is a man and truth is a woman. Just to give you the kind of the dynamics of what's going on here in terms of the gender dynamics. Now, essentially, those two are in this friendly partnership. They're different, but they kind of get on well together until falsehood essentially stages this big trick where he digs a hole by a tree, digs this big hole and says, "Oh, truth, could you just go down into that hole and grab something for me?" And then, he just starts filling in the hole and essentially digs a grave for truth and buries truth. Now, this is where the story picks up. To be more sure of his victory, falsehood built himself a palace over the tomb of truth. But it's said that sometimes she, truth, turns in her grave. When this happens, the palace crumbles like a house of cards and buries all the innocent and guilty people who've been living there. But the people have other things to do than mourn their dead. They continue to carry out their legacy. Those eternal dupes rebuild the palace, each time more beautiful than the old one. And falsehood, lame and squinting, continues to reign there to this very day. So, here's a question for you. If you want to just pop it in the chat, what do you think might be going on? I've just read you a fairy tale written in the 19th century. Now, this is a fairy tale, as we said, written by the guy who funds the Statue of Liberty. He's trying to get across different messages. He's trying to think about like ideas of constitutions and liberty and freedom and justice and these types of things. And he's writing this story about falsehood, a smooth talker who's trying to get one over on truth, good, simple truth. Tricks her, he buries her, and then builds a palace on top of that tomb. What do you guys think is going on in this political fairy tale? What's the message you think that that your man Laboulaye, Edouard Laboulaye, might be trying to get across to his readers? What do you think? I'll just wait a minute. I'll pause a moment to let you guys type in the chat. See what you think. An interesting one, isn't it? To think about sitting down over your kind of your breakfast or your lunch to sit and read some fairy tales, just to get across some political points. Certainly a different way of trying to do it, isn't it? You might use films today. You might use essays or short stories, novels. You know, might make a political point. Might be an interesting one. But yeah, what's going on in this political fairy tale, do you think? I can see a couple of people typing just now, so I'll just hold off as I'm going. Okay, Terrell says, an analogy for how certain politicians or governments deceive their citizens by burying truth. Yeah, I think that's a useful one. Yeah, so it's an idea that something's lost, something's like suppressed and hidden, you know? Like you just kind of, as you say, literally bury the truth. Like, yeah, people are trying to get one over on it. It's a useful one, yeah, for sure. There's a really good reading of it, I think. Falsehood is the king. Falsehood's the one that rules in that palace. So yeah, absolutely. There's political power there for sure. Yeah. What do you think about the role of truth, though? That's an interesting one. Because truth isn't done, is she? What do you guys think about the role of truth? You're right. Truth's buried. What is truth? don't know. How can truth have an effect afterwards? What do we reckon? I see people typing just now. I'll just leave off to let you go through. It's an interesting one here to consider. This is if you were doing an academic analysis, you might hear talk about ideas of agency. You know, you think about who is influencing the scene, who is influencing the narrative. Yasmin, do you want to come in and tell you?
Yeah, I mean, because I was just thinking about kind of reading this passage because obviously I'm in third year, so it was really just something that kind of it was like a flashback in a way in terms of the assignments and kind of the essays that you usually do because this is kind of like a typical topic of it, and you kind of really do engage with these ideas, obviously on a much more intricate and complex level because obviously you're there in a lecture for say an hour, maybe two sometimes, but this is kind of like the foundational basis of something that you would be given by your lecturers.
Sure, yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, this is I kind of wanted to throw this in as a little bit of kind of literary analysis, so they can do that
Mm.
alongside the kind of historical sense of that as well. Oh, okay. So Tyrell says truth can prompt dissent and lead to revolutions. People who observe truth may challenge certain political leaders. That's a really good point. Yeah, I think that's a really good one. If you got this idea as well that there's something there, some essence that even if you bury it still makes the ground rumble, doesn't it? It still changes things. And that's maybe something that you could see that as a commentary on France and republics. Even though France is at that stage in the Second Empire, there's still a sense that there's a republic, a republic of free citizens right there that could like shake things down and come back to heart. There could be something that could be captured and protected in a constitution, for example.
Mm.
But you're right, more broadly as well. These are things that come together that work in that sense. Brilliant. Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Tyrell. That's a really good one as well. And Maya, if you want to come in as well, like please do feel free. Very key, very. You should feel free to put it in chat. No problem at all. But yeah, really interesting there. So you guys can see we've done a little bit of history so far. We talked a little bit the kind of political influences of it. You might talk about the kind of political thought. You look at someone like Wollstonecraft. You might find her work in some of that like, module I mentioned, the foundations of modern thought. You would do this type of kind of literary analysis as you would do in kind of modules in English or comparative literature, thinking about these types of ideas. There's a whole module on short stories in comparative literature that looks at different world approaches to short stories. So this gives us a sense of the kind of political ideas inherent in something like these fairy tales. Now, uh, Tyrell's asking, do you use historiography in liberal arts or the School of Arts more broadly? Certainly, yeah. So one of the things you can do in liberal arts, of course, is choose to study history modules. And we certainly find that there's a lot of historiography that becomes useful in that. Now, we talk about historiography, what we usually mean is analysing different historical perspectives, different approaches by historians, and comparing them and looking at how those different angles interact and can tell us more. So you find a lot of different ways to interpret this, to look at different ideas like that. And you'll find a lot of those modules on offer within liberal arts as well. Now, I was just going to go on in terms of that content to show you a couple more little bits about this Statue of Liberty. If you look up the top, that painting there you can see is a photo. A photo? I can always say that. It's not a photo. It's an image, a painting. It's actually a statue of George Washington shaking hands with the Marquis Lafayette. Now, have people heard of Marquis Lafayette? Yeah, Yasmin, where do you hear about him?
It was actually in my course because
Okay.
within my course is very interdisciplinary, meaning
Yeah,
that
yeah.
like you get a lot of other subjects coming through, including history, which is what we
Mm.
just kind of talked about just now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And in a module that I was starting to do with like how heroes are perceived in one decade or another, Marcus Lafayette really came into conversation with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A really important person. People call him the hero of two worlds. This nickname gets chucked about a lot. Garibaldi gets that nickname as well. But yeah, basically the idea is he's active in a number of different places. He's a French nobleman, but he goes all the way across to the US because he's committed to this idea of the American Revolution. You can see that quote from a letter he writes to Washington, George Washington. I thought that here almost every man was a lover of liberty and would rather die free than live a slave. Now, does anybody know any modern media that he appears in? Lafayette. You might think of him as a more kind of like in a more common thing. And the only reason I'm thinking about this is that my daughter was it. Exactly. Yes, Sophia, you're absolutely right. Hamilton. He's the ships and guns guy. The very same. Thank you, Maya, as well. Yeah, absolutely. My daughter is 9, and she is obsessed with watching Hamilton. She knows the lyrics to all the songs. And every time I do one of these kind of talks, if she's around the house, she'll say, "Oh, you're talking about Lafayette?" You know, that kind of way in terms of hearing about it. But yeah, as Yasmin saying, you can see how these heroic representations echo across the ages, but also how they get like fitted into these kind of unusual things. And actually, Lafayette is really important to this story because he's part of the reason that we talk about France and America as sister republics. France and the United States become republics at roughly the same time. And actually, when we look even at the dedication of the Statue of Liberty in 1886 in the centenary of the American Revolution, you can see that La Boulaye specifically references Lafayette in that actual dedication. He says, "May my voice at last find echoes in the country of Lafayette and prove to the United States that France has always remained faithful to America and to liberty." Now, what I wanted to do with that is to show you how this idea, a statue that we recognize, one that we know, the Statue of Liberty, actually looking at it through different disciplines, different approaches, we can kind of pull out different ideas, some political thought, talking about Wollstonecraft and liberty and those types of ideas. We can talk about ideas of, movement and travel, about the Suez Canal, about how, the idea of opening the Suez Canal is, what Bartholdi is designing for, that he's caught up in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. We can also look at the idea of the politics of republic and empire in France and see how those kind of things come together. But also then things like literary analysis tells us something more than just the political standpoint of that. And actually, that's a nice echo, isn't it? Because if we think about that, we think about La Boulaye's political fairy tales. That's exactly what Hamilton tries to do when Lin-Manuel Miranda writes it and performs it. It's a commentary on liberty, on the Republic, on those values that the Republic is founded upon. And that's one of the things you see in that transformation of liberty. We talk about it, freedom, as an idea that we all think we know what we mean. But freedom changes and moves. And you can see that, those different ideas. People tell you that freedom means something and actually means something quite different. That falsehood, that false idea of what freedom can mean, can also be disturbed by the truth of it rumbling below the surface to collapse those palaces. Interestingly, the Statue of Liberty, when it's built, is understood to be something referring to abolition as well. And that's another really important one. The poem that's at the bottom of it by Emma Goldman, a Jewish woman who comes, is an exile from Europe, talks about the the Statue of Liberty, this thing which has been modeled an Egyptian peasant woman, which moves through Europe, through Asia, all the way in North Africa, all the way across to the Americas. It's really something which moves right through all those different things and means different visions of liberty. But in the US, with the broken shackles at her feet, it means a commentary on the evils of slavery, on the evils of enslavement. And actually, that moves us right back to Mary Wollstonecraft. This conception that liberty is something important, something to be fought for, something to be defended. And that if, through gender, through race, through ideas of your position in life, you're treated as property, then actually liberty is something that does not yet exist. I think that's a really important message. If we talk about the liberal arts, it's the things that allow you to be a free citizen, that allow you to have all these different ideas. So that was our little taster today, our little wander, inspired by my taking my daughter to Disneyland Paris, of thinking again about how the Statue of Liberty can tell us different things about it. But you can also think about the economic idea. Let me tell you one of the reasons they do it in the Disneyland Paris, because things tank when they first open, because everything's different in France, because French employees don't want to be called caste members. No, they are unionized employees selling their labor to an employer. They want to be respected for that. It seems reasonable. They don't like the fact nobody sells alcohol. They can't buy wine. That's an unusual one as well. Actually, you can see all kinds of things. The street you walk along right up to the door is called the Rue d'Issigny, and because it's named after a town. I'll write it in here, the Rue de Issigny. So it's named after a town, Issigny, the street of Issigny. Why? Because somebody really earned their money. Because what they did is they found out that if you trace Walt Disney's heritage back far enough. It turns out that during the Norman conquest, Walt Disney's family were related to the barons of Isigny, the Seigneur d'Isigny, and they sailed across with William the Conqueror, were rewarded with lands in Ireland, and they became de Isigny, and over time that became Disney. Now, if you go to the town of Isigny in northern France, you can say over to the Isigny, you can find a museum that actually Walt Disney's brother went to and opened because they have this big thing now about the family's French heritage. And so this whole idea about what was going on, about truth and falsehood and all the rest of it, what they tried to do there and what they're trying to do with this is say, oh no, don't worry, it's not American. It's French, really. So there you go, some facts that you can take it with you and remember about this. Whether or not Walt Disney is really French, and whether or not we can see in the actual Statue of Liberty different visions of liberty that come right back through this nifty idea as well. So, what I thought I'd do, we kind of finished up there in terms of our little content taster. I thought I would maybe pose some questions to Yasmin. I'll post some questions, mostly as a way of kind of vamping in the meantime, so that if you guys have questions, please, 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 just pop them down in the chat window. That could be questions about liberal arts and the program. That could be questions about what it's like to be a student at Queen Mary, and then either myself or Yasmin, I'm sure, will be happy to answer them, to think about those. Now, I guess if we start, Yasmin, obviously you're in your final year. Now, if you cast your mind back way into the past, what was it like for you starting your first year of your degree? What kind of things did you find in terms of starting as a student, in terms of getting to grips with things? Like, how did you get on in terms of starting as a first year?
Honestly, it was very much very much what was looking for, because I think what people forget when they're kind of first starting uni is that uni is very much dependent on what your own goals and objectives are for what you're looking into in terms of your education and kind of what you're looking for in terms of your future.
Mm.
And for me, I found Queen Mary very, very palatable to my own goals and objectives, which was to find a really good balance between academia and social life. And obviously, when when you what's the word, apply to those 5 unis that you have to go to, and then you go to all these open days, and you're kind of really figuring out what is the best kind of uni for you. And in all the unis I went to, I never felt that my goals and my objectives were being achieved. But then when I went to Queen Mary, I really felt that it was kind of very palatable and accommodating to my own needs here. And I feel like that's what sets Queen Mary apart from other unis, I would say, in terms of it takes very much everything into consideration, because you do realize that obviously you do have other things going on, and you're dealing with you may be dealing with like mental health issues, or you're dealing with whatever's going on in your life. And so obviously, just because if you've had like a really bad year, for example, that doesn't determine how you graduate, or like what bad grades you got. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're very accommodating to that, and because of that, we have a very good ethos in terms of diversity and inclusion here. And I've definitely very, very much felt that, because I'm from two nationalities, for example. There is often a sense of disconnect, that people don't understand you, but Queen Mary is very different here with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been teaching for a while, and it's brilliant to see the amount of students you meet from like all over the world and from right next door. That's one of the things I find weird. I've taught other universities, and it's people from all over the world. But the great thing is you get people from Tower Hamlets, and you get people from like, I don't know, Egypt, or America, or Cuba, or I don't know, France, etc. It's everywhere. It's brilliant. I think it's a really good thing, and that's it. Did you do any like society stuff? You do any student society stuff, or?
No, I did. So I did about 3 or 4. So I was a part of archery. I was also a part of the book club. I was also a part of the English society as well. I would say generally the clubs and societies here are very much, there's loads. There's numerous amounts of them. Even now I don't even know how many there are, because
Yeah.
there's so many. And I think that, whether you're into sports, or, when you're into like anime, for example, or whether you're into comics, there's always something for that. I'd like, for example, I know that they've started a video game development club, which is something I would have been interested in, but unfortunately came after my time.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But my point is there is something for everybody here. Whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, or you know, whether you like going to clubs or house parties, or whether you rather just be by yourself and do arts and crafts. Like there really is something for everybody here. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. It's, yeah, I always love when I do the open days as well. We just did open days recently, and of course the guys that do the like medieval combat are out there in full suits of armor fighting with
Yeah.
swords. But you've also got the people from the Lego Society, and you've got people
Yes,
from
yes,
Model
yes. Yeah,
United
you do.
Nations, and it's just, yeah, like you say, it's like it's
Hmm.
wonderful to see the amount of different
Mm,
things as well.
hmm.
Now I can see your questions come in as well from Terrell, talking about, liking to take the idea of optional history modules. Now with a specific degree like comparative literature, I think first of all I would say definitely worth getting in contact with the course lead. One of my colleagues, Sheetal Pravichandra, will definitely want to talk to you about these. But on the whole, I would say that actually in all of our degrees in the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, in your second year, you can take a good portion of your credits outside of your home school. And that gives you the option to try and do some different things as well. Of course, you might find that you're so overwhelmed by the amount of comparative literature modules you want to study, you think, this is just what I want to do. But you might find that actually there are some good options that are available in terms of within history as well. I'm split between, I work in the School of the Arts and I also work in School of History. I work in teaching both is the kind of the root of it, and I know there are lots of modules in that second year that are very popular in history with students from other schools. So it might well be that you'll have fantastic options in comparative literature, but yeah, you might find that you want to take an optional history module, and that should be fine in your second year. Let's say you can take a certain amount of module, a certain amount of credits, excuse me, outside of your degree pathway. But yeah, any more detail on that, you can drop me an email and I'll get the absolute chapter and verse just to make sure I'm giving you the right the right figures as well. Oh, actually, as I'm talking, I've just switched the slide here to bring up the last one, simply because it has my email address on it. To remind you that if you want to get in touch with me, you can just drop me an email. I can see a couple other people typing, so I'll just hold off for those questions. But yeah, I'll write my email address to come in. But in the
Right.
meantime, Yasmin, why don't I ask you maybe about what sorts of what sort of modules have you studied in your, I mentioned you were English and creative writing. What kind of things have you studied in that?
The kind of modules that I study, it was it very much is dependent on what you want to do. Actually, before I continue, I think there is actually a question from Sophia.
Okay, yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay, so the culture and diversity module. I need to double check, Sophia, just exactly what you mean. So there was one module we mentioned that was called culture and language. And that is really a tour across a lot of the disciplines within the School of the Arts. So yeah, I can guarantee you that goes far beyond London, for sure. And really takes you quite wide out into the world in terms of what you're studying. And people talk about like using rap music as a source. You're talking about different approaches to culture and visual sources. There's a whole wide world of content within the culture and language module. If it was the London culture performance one you met, that is mostly focused on London, just as an idea of using the stages of London as a window on the world. So London, of course, is a city which is hugely diverse and hugely plugged in to kind of global currents. So yeah, his focus is on London, but tries to use London as a lens into the wider world. Think of it as global London. But absolutely, throughout your module, throughout your course, your degree, you'll study a lot further than London. Yasmin, in terms of if we go back to the kind of things you study, I
Yeah,
mean,
of course.
you certainly will have
S-
studied far beyond London, I imagine.
yeah, I mean, so with the modules that I studied, a lot of it had the same sort of approach as liberal arts in terms of in terms of kind of really focusing on something that you wouldn't think is actually that important, but then it kind of reveals you something about the wider world. So for example, in Shakespeare, you study for example, you study Romeo and Juliet, and you kind of, and obviously you have the, kind of marriage between Romeo and Juliet. And obviously that doesn't seem, obviously that's a big thing in the plot, but it's something that's almost so well known that you don't even register it because of how much you study it. But anyway, it gives you an insight into dynastic marriages, and it kind of gives you an insight into the kind of religious like appearances of that. So a lot of the modules within Queen Mary, they're very much centered around that. Like how can you broaden your kind of horizons? How can you deepen your understandings of the historical context going on at that time?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Yasmin. And I can see questions coming from Maya as well, who asks, do liberal arts students have the opportunity for group work and discussions as part of their work, even though they may have different chosen modules? Or would this be more the case in the compulsory modules? Now, you got a really good point there, Maya, which is we get all the liberal arts students come in, and they come in as a cohort, and they do some core modules together. But then, as you say, they all start to choose different modules and go off in different directions. But that means we've got about 30 credits of compulsory modules in each year, each level. And that's where you'll be with your core of liberal arts students. You'll also find you guys, there's a lot of socialization, a lot of socializing amongst the liberal arts students themselves. But the idea isn't when they choose different modules, they don't study them alone. So the modules that Yasmin mentioned, for example, are the kind that would be available to a liberal arts student as well. And as a
Mm.
liberal arts student, you would then go into an English literature module, or you would go into a history module, or you would go into a comparative literature module, or a politics module. And actually, you'd be in there with politics students, with history students, with English literature students. So you'd be working as a group, and you'd be talking to them and working through that at the same time. I mentioned things like the Liberal Arts Society. That was a student venture that they put together. Those kind of things are great. And we try to organize nice events throughout the year and that bring together the group to make sure that you feel like a cohort going through as well. You'll be in different classrooms, you'll be studying different things according to your preference. But there's lots of opportunities, I think, for really feeling like a group, feeling like a cohort, which is hopefully a really positive thing, I think. You can see typing there again, so I'll
Yeah,
just
no, same.
I'll just pause to make sure. I tell you, you're doing better. You guys are all doing better than me, far faster at typing than I am. It's yeah.
Yeah. I will also say actually, in terms of the academic like lectures that you are given, they're very much specialists in their fields. So, for example, if you take a creative writing module, for example, they're all very published authors and poets that have qualifications behind their names. Or if you're thinking of doing like a research position, for example, you are given a mentor who is a specialist in that field and has dedicated years of research. So you're not kind of really, you're not given just general information, if you know what I mean. Just going off Maya's comments, it definitely very much is like I very much met a lot of other people in different kind of courses and kind of different modules who really bring a lot of kind of perspectives on that. Because like for example, you can do historical modules if you want to, or geography modules, or and kind of have that kind of cross cross subjects like talks, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so with that, you are given a lot of information, but it's really, really cool because you get to expand upon that and you kind of get to go into unfamiliar territories of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as Yasmin says, most modules you'll find you get a 1 hour lecture, and that's when you're in a big room and there's a kind of a lecturer will be talking, a specialist in the
Mm-hmm.
field be kind of outlining stuff and passing it around, and then you'll have smaller seminar groups, usually about 15 people or so, in a discussion group, really led by the students. That discussion, there'll be a same kind of specialist like myself, another academic in there leading, and kind of you'll prepare for that and done reading beforehand as well. So lots of different opportunities for learning. You'll find assessment varies right across. That's a thing you
Mm-hmm.
always know about before you take a module as well. So you can sometimes pick for different things that you like. But I'm also aware just now that we are actually running to time, and I was warned that I shouldn't go over, and
Yeah.
I've not to keep you guys too long. So I should wrap things up. But I promise, you may have heard just a moment ago an ice cream van pulling up outside my house. But I promise you, that's not why I'm why I'm running off to catch the ice cream van. But it's yeah, just to make sure we all finish on time. But what I want to say is thank you guys very much for joining us. Thank you, Yasmin, as well, for all your
Of
help and for
course.
answering questions. For everyone that's here, thank you very much for taking part. Thank you very much for sitting through it all. As you can see on the the screen, I've got my email address. Please, 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 if you've got any questions at all, just drop me a line, and I'm very happy to answer, to speak to you, and to continue the conversation. But in the meantime, thanks, guys. Bye.
Hey guys.
Bye.